Just a heads up, we'll get started in 2 minutes. 2 minutes, we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, let's kick off. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets Forum webinar, where each morning in the Middle East, we take stock of the market open in Asia and where the direction of travel is through the day. Let's kick off with regular commentator Peter McGuire, CEO of XM Australia, sitting in Sydney. Peter, the markets have opened once again a little bit down, but I don't see any heart attack here despite the OPEC disruptions.
No, good morning, Sean, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, if you're looking at oil, certainly it's off a little bit. That US dollar's come under some pressure, continues sell-off, and we're now at 91 for that US dollar index, Sean. So that's being pushed down, and I won't be surprised at all to be in the 80s, I'd say, over the next maybe 2 weeks. I think
what's ultimately the driver there? Risk on and further stimulus?
I think so. I think that seems to be the major concern. You've got Biden coming out and everyone's trying to push forward. We spoke in previous weeks, will they have stimulus and will that be received by Christmas for all the residents of the US? I think there will be something, a sweetheart deal pushed through in some capacity, and that will push further down the, that pressure on the US dollar. Gold's up, Sean, 1835. It's up $50 from those lows that we experienced last week. So it's all been quite an exciting time across currencies. As far as crude, well, we're going to discuss it over the next half hour. Could be interesting what they do is in the old Vienna this evening.
Yeah, indeed. It strikes me that the market is maybe giving them a little bit of breathing room, given that we've had pretty strong signals that we're not going to now get a straight 3-month rollover. Let's go to Omar Al-Ubaydli, sitting in Bahrain, Director of Research at the Bahrain Center for Strategic International and Energy Studies, to use the acronym DERASAT. Dare I use the acronym? Omar, it does feel like the tug of war between glass half full optimism and glass half empty, sort of bearish, is starting to be more defined into the optimism and into the half full globally now. This bionic sort of vaccine euphoria seems to be impossible to stop, regardless of 270,000 people dead in the US, etc.
Yes, I fully agree. What's important about the vaccines is that it's not just one vaccine. It's that there's been a series of vaccines that have come out at the same time, more or less. And that's going to help people overcome as I'm sure you're aware, there's a sort of a strong anti-vax movement already in the world. And then added to that, there are people who are justifiably concerned that if there's just one vaccine, that the results have been fudged, the stakes are very high. But when you have 3, 4, 5 vaccines that have been trialed on different populations in different parts of the world, and all subjected to peer review in the top journals, it's going to give people a lot more confidence. And also it's going to give people a lot more confidence in terms of the supply chain, because different techniques have been used to develop these vaccines, and where there's previously a concern that if there was only 1 or 2, how are you going to produce it in the right quantities? When you've got 4, 5, 6 producers, different options, it's making people feel a lot better. And I think people are going to be ready to accept the fact that something close to a forced vaccination or pseudo-forced vaccination for a large percentage of the population is going to happen, and it's going to be for the benefits of all.
Andrei Belyi, professor, founder, and CEO of Balesene. Good morning, and thank you for joining us again. What do you think is the perspective of Russia sitting at the OPEC Plus table today? What will be their posture regarding policy for the first quarter?
Well, I think that there is a clear sign from Russia that it wants the prices to be somehow regulated by OPEC. But what's interesting, I don't know if you came across to this quite an interesting news, is that Rosneft proposed to have a quota trading between the OPEC plus quotas. Basically, the biggest, let's say, Russian company proposed to have this quota trading in order to solve the issue of those countries who cannot commit or who basically cheat on their quotas. And that's pretty interesting, whether it will work or not, whether on one hand Saudi Arabia or on the other hand smaller oil producers like Kazakhstan or Iraq, who are usually in trouble for maintaining their quotas, would buy it. And that may be the most interesting part of this OPEC meeting.
Do you think there's any equation or concern that Russia would back away as they did in March from the OPEC Plus, or are they locked in for the long term, do you think?
It seems like a lock-in for a longer term. Yeah, in March the situation was slightly different because there was a discussion about whether to keep the old quotas or introduce new ones. So Russia insisted we keep the old system in place. We don't need to introduce new ones. And then Saudis insisted that either a new one or we leave. And then Russia left. So that was kind of like bulk of the events. And in addition to that, those who negotiated with OPEC, they didn't understand what kind of losses Russian exporters will have. So there is always a gap between those who are in the political level and those who are at the industrial level. So Russian crude is in average heavier than Arabian light. And it has very specific market for those refineries who can refine it. Once Saudi Arabian or Arabian light came into the European market, then all the Russian clients got interested in it and started buying it. And then Russia started losing market. Yeah? So, and that maybe was not expected. Now, as we know it, we will not repeat the mistake, as it seems like.
Peter, if you're looking at China for signals, I mean, from an OPEC Plus point of view today, you'd have to say that all looks pretty buoyant in China. Buying of oil seems to be back up at the higher levels that we saw earlier this year, and that the outlook for Q1 is quite positive.
Absolutely, Sean. I mean, the growth out of we've experienced in the last 3 to 4 months has shot the ball out of the park. I feel in a lot of ways that will continue over the next couple of months. We don't know the true number as far as their COVID. No one can really put hand on heart and say what the conditions are. So they're leading at the start of the charge, and they're certainly gaining momentum as each week and month goes on as far as consumption. I will say this, the attraction as far as base metals has been very, very strong also. So, and of course, the price that we're experiencing with iron ore. So it's been a wonderful time for miners, great time for producers. and it could be a nice little lead up to Lunar New Year, another month and a half to 2 months of good times for them.
Peter, how much do you think the market would punish the oil price today if OPEC deviate too far away from the expectation of the 3-month rollover?
Well, Sean, that's a variable. I'd say to probably make it dumped, 3 to 5%, 6%. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That's after most OPEC meetings. The volatility, whipsaws traditionally over that 24 to 36 hour period. It's all over the shop. So I won't be surprised this time round either. And yeah,
I mean, it does seem like the market is digesting a graduation across first quarter. The compromise that OPEC seemed to be looking at 500,000 barrels a day in January and another bit, etc. That the market seems not going to be too disturbed by that, and we'll see how that plays out. Omar, what's your own expectation? OPEC follows through and delivers as market expectation?
Well, to be honest, the fact that we've gotten OPEC's been able to keep it together this long is I think it's close to a miracle. It goes against the logic of every economics model you can have of how if we call it a cartel operates. But given they've managed to go this far, I think what's holding it together more than anything is that is the realization that if they do kick off a price war, it's going to be curtains for everybody involved, and it's only that fear of that they're standing on the edge of the cliff. I think that will keep them going for a while. But as soon as the magic of the vaccine. I see Omar on the chat has been indicating why the vaccine is more important than stimulus, and I completely agree with him. If the vaccine does provide the shot to the economy that we all hope it will, and that begins to surface, in the first half of 2021, then they will no longer be standing on the edge of the abyss. I can expect things to unravel very quickly. But until we reach that point, it's just that fear that is keeping them together.
Dr. Andrei, the sort of vaccine euphoria, I would imagine, has the epicenter of that really should be in Europe, given the scale of the COVID trauma that has hit Europe this year, and the first approval for the vaccines coming out of London yesterday for the Pfizer drug with the German partner. Do you think, what is your own view on that outlook for the vaccine euphoria trumping the sort of COVID reality that obviously most of Europe is still living with?
Right. It's a complicated question. Of course, it does not impact much on the economic recovery, at least at this stage, right?
We're still at a double dip recession in Europe.
And the recession is deep, and you have to understand the vaccine doesn't have a direct impact. Plus, there is a social reaction. So people, part of the business is already used to have things online and would be still a little bit scared of the events. And even more, the dynamic of the virus are getting worse. So I would say the winter will be tough. And that definitely will affect oil and gas markets.
I see Putin yesterday instructed Russia to roll out its own vaccine. What's kind of the word on the street regarding the Russia vaccine? Is it serious? Is it not? What's the view?
I cannot judge. The only thing is that some top Russian officials resigned after the vaccine was put to the market. However, I would not exclude that it works, and that's why I would not rush to buy it myself, let's say like this, but I would not exclude that it's actually one of the solutions. Moreover, the way how the British vaccine was approved, it was also pretty speedy, and that's why I would not be surprised that the British vaccine doesn't work either. So let's not.
Well,
illusions.
what I've been sort of reading on this, Peter, is that it's not so much as it turns out that this was a very complicated scientific challenge, but the challenge is in the logistics. How do you reproduce 5 billion vials of vaccine X or Y or Z? How do you get it into airplanes and travel around the world? But the actual science of the vaccine apparently was not that complicated, hence the high level of efficacy. What's your own thoughts on that, Peter, and the sense of timeline for the reality and the sentiment to come together? I know in Asia it's already there a bit.
Yeah, exactly, Sean. And that was the issue. I spoke to a top medico on Saturday. I had the good fortune of spending half an hour with him discussing this matter. His thoughts, 2 points. First off, you need 2 injections over 30 days. So it's not 1, it's 2. Second point is one of the professors that was looking at the, very much deeply involved in the design of the drug, and his viewpoint was he wants to see a test case of 500,000 people, give it 6 months and see if there's any backwash. And I think a lot of people, I don't know, maybe I don't know where I sit on it, but I think there's a large proportion of the population, Sean, are quite reticent. They don't want to be the first cab off the rank. They might just say, well, let's just see what happens to people after they take this. We understand that the health services, the front line of the UK are really going to embrace this. I think there's so many different components to it.
I mean, it is an important point ultimately, because the sentiment can only carry you too far, right? I mean, if equity X and Y is trading at 30 times PE, that's an indication that profits next year have to be absolutely bionic in order to reach and validate those PE ratios.
Absolutely right. And are we fully cooked? I mean, as the market's had such an enormous uptick since really the start of April, it doesn't seem to be exhausted yet, but there will be a tipping point sometime, Sean. Cheap money, everything thrown at it. It's running on fumes. It's running on everything at the moment. And
I mean, it might be the old classic buy on the rumor, sell on the news. I mean, the actual reality of economic growth. Peter, I wanted to ask you, notably the story of the week out of Australia. This ongoing spat with China just seems to be getting more visceral and bringing in more and more consequences. What's your own thought of where it's at and where it's going?
Well, that's right. We've had, from prime ministers and ministers quite shocked by those actions by China that demonstrated the Afghani child and all of that. So I won't go down that pathway, but I will say that we've seen in the last matter of hours, I'm just looking on Bloomberg, that they've accepted some of that coal shipments. We've got the best part of 60 odd ships sitting off the shores of China, $700 million worth of coal. We understand the red wine. We understand there's 7 commodities that they're crimping. So it might be a little bit of a deal there to just smooth the water a little bit, and maybe that's the pathway forward, Sean. I'm not sure. As each day rolls forward, things may settle down a little bit. You
would imagine that it's not exactly in China's interest to start the Biden era having a big spat with one of its little brothers, right? I mean, it would seem just an odd way to commence affairs, and just in that isolated prism. But I'm sure there are other prisms to look through on this problem. Omar, from the point of view of where the regional economy in the Gulf and the Middle East goes now at the end of this year, looking to the start of a new year, a lot of fiscal deficits in the region. Will as we sit today looking at OPEC, of course, revenue is critical. Do they have any capacity to facilitate, if they pump more, the natural outcome will be lower price? Do you think they're willing to do that?
I think actually what's going to be more important on whether they pump more or not is what's going to be happening in the White House. A significant amount of the revenue of all the countries, including UAE and Saudi Arabia, is going on, various, operations beyond their shores, whether it's in Yemen, Libya, etc., and so on and so forth. And a critical enabling factor or critical factor, I should say, in all of these configurations has been the position of the White House. And now, the signals from Biden administration have been that they're going to step up efforts to suspend or end the conflict in Yemen. And if that happens, then we don't have official figures, but the amount of money we're talking about in terms of what Saudi Arabia spends there, which is considerable amounts, and there's a lot of all these players spend on regional security. So I think much more important than what's going to be happening on the revenue side is what's going to be happening on the expenditure side in terms of these. So if Biden and his administration can take steps to create a more stable region geopolitically and bring down the expenditure of all parties on arms, defense, and security of all forms, that could be far more important and create a lot less pressure in terms of OPEC and striking agreements and balancing budgets and so on and so forth than any minutiae of a particular OPEC agreement.
Andrea, I haven't had your weigh in yet on the Biden presidency and the impact it will have, do you think, for the Nord Stream 2 and other issues revolving around Russia and Europe?
I personally think that Biden's administration won't be much different from Trump administration and everything related to the relations to Russia. Just if Trump was putting geopolitics ahead as the main argument, Biden will speak about democracy promotion and about other things. Basically, the cover will be different, the essence will be same.
But it is very important to Biden and to the Democrats to have a good relationship with Germany, and that will be, they can't kill Nord Stream 2 and have a good relationship with Germany. You either have to choose one.
In reality, I have, let's say, a feeling that transatlantic relations will not be saved by Biden administration. There are already feelings in Europe, and particularly in Germany, that the United States is not their main ally. It has been portrayed and repeated, persistently repeated over the last 4 years. So the sentiment is there. We're going our way, even if the Americans don't like it. Whether Americans will like Europe, probably neither, because the European Union will now install border adjustment tax for the climate change purposes. And the American products gonna be under this hit as well. And obviously trade tensions between the United States and the European Union are very likely to emerge. So I might be a little bit more pessimistic there, and I would say...
And of course, the Europeans are going to feel a little bit burned, obviously, after the Trump era. They won't know what to trust. It's sort of once bitten, twice shy. Let's go to the survey question, which is sort of relevant to some of the themes we've been talking about this morning. Vaccine euphoria, bullish sentiment will trump all COVID bearish sentiment in Q1. I mean, it's very big picture, it's very broad strokes, but ultimately glass half full will trump glass half empty in Q1, and that the same things that might have held the oil price back in the fourth quarter will be unleashed in the first. So the vaccine euphoria trumps everything is basically the question. Agree or disagree? So, Peter, the rest of this week, anything else to be watching? Obviously, markets in Asia are, on the equity side, still tipping close to near record levels. Although one would have to note, as I often remind myself, that the Nikkei was 30,000 30 years ago and has never got back there since. So it's getting close again.
Yeah, exactly. I remember the dealing room. I was working for a company, Bain Refco in Sydney. It was 39,000 odd in... and I could nearly pick the day, it was 89. And I think it peaked, and just the collapse, we all know that it hit 8,000. And here we are, it's onward and upward, but it still has to rise 50% from where it is at the moment, Sean, to take out those highs that we experienced 31 years ago. I'm not sure how long that takes to happen. Japanese real estate's a different animal today than what it was in the 80s. what am I looking at? I'm looking at that weakness of US dollar, whether the equity rally remains over the next couple of days, if there's any hiccups.
It seems that the oil markets are sucking in a lot of that sideline money now, finally coming into the oil markets looking for upside next year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think traders have had a nice little run up, certainly over the last couple of weeks. It's been great. As I said, if you didn't make $1 in November, give the game away. So everything's been bullish, gold off. I'm still looking at the US politics, how that plays out. I still think that I watched Donald Trump today, 27 or 28 minutes. Looks like it's going to the Supreme Court. He's going to take it all the way. So who knows how that plays out? It's still a work in progress. Linwood. I still think that there's that erring of uncertainty, which really could unhinge the markets brutally if something out of left field was going to come forward, Sean. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at over the next week or so.
It's always there, and one has to think that there is a potential for whether you get the sort of big asteroid hit, or you just get a series of these constant annoying distractions like we've had over the last month since the election. I'd say we can expect a lot more of that. Whether it, I mean, it's interesting how the market or the body politic reacted to Bill Barr's statement yesterday that he became persona non grata overnight, and he was probably the most loyal follower. Omar, your thoughts for the rest of the week? Is everything about OPEC and how it comes out today?
No, I'd say actually, so that's important, but I'd say more important is to spring up from Peter. I mean, I saw Trump's speech. He's still fully defiant, and it's not as if there were indications that this conflict is petering out. But yesterday's message was anything but that. And at the same time, there's cracks showing in Biden's coalition. I saw statements from the representatives of the African American community complaining that there hadn't been enough positions done to senior positions done to African Americans. So Biden's got a very tough job in front of him, and his coalition is not as secure and unified as he would like, and he's going to have a headache from day one. And obviously he's not going to have the U.S. Senate, so it's going to be for the rest of this week. First of all, it's going to be how is the U.S. domestic political arena going to advance, and what are the consequences going to be for the rest of the world? Because ultimately, and you saw, I think it's 220,000 cases yesterday and 2,000 dead in the US. The corona situation is not getting any better at all.
No, it's really traumatic, and hospitals are actually going to start turning people away by Christmas, which will be a rather stark image. I'm not certain that the Republicans are going to take those 2 Senate seats. A lot of this noise from the Republicans, and particularly from the madness of the Trump center, I think that is discouraging to Republican voters turning out in January 5th, would be my view. Maybe they're looking at it differently, but I think that election will be quite close. Let's get the survey result before Andrei gets the last word today. Vaccine euphoria, will Trump COVID bearish? Agree 72%. That's kind of overwhelming. I think I would agree with that. Andrei, your thoughts rest of the week, what you'll be watching, and what's your expectation for the OPEC meeting today? Put you on the spot.
Let's say like this, my bet, the OPEC Plus needs to find an agreement, right?
Yes.
They don't have a choice because, of course, quotas are bad, but an oil war is certainly worse.
Yes.
Again, the United States are in the spot of all the attention, because it's interesting, but Donald Trump still didn't recognize the elections, and there is still no transition to Biden administration. At the same time, in my eyes, Biden administration disappoints by their choices, by returning of Janet Yellen and by appointing John Kerry to climate change envoy. It seems like Biden sticks to his old guys, to the people he knows, and basically doesn't respond to the US societal demand to have a change, right? And neither it saves of us from a good political economy in the United States, because we know their mistakes, and the business community would like to see something else. They didn't like Trump, but they would like to see something else, not as a return to the pre-Trump era in its purity. And right, I would say these are the main elements for the rest of the week to observe. And it's quite interesting also to observe the return of the colder winter and a rebound of the gas market. So basically, it's interesting to see that gas markets, both in the United States and in the European Union, are not affected much by the pandemic, apart of some segments of LNG. So I would say, look at the natural gas. It may well rebound during this week or this month.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up there. I mean, my sense of the Biden team is he is picking a team that does two things. One, gets approved by the Senate, and expecting it to be a Republican Senate, so he has to get easy approval for those picks. And two, he wants people that hit the ground running on the job, that there is no on the job training time. And so I think those two factors give you the team that we have. My sense of today's meeting at OPEC is the same as the beginning of the week, when I guided that I think they would end up in a slightly disjointed agreement, which would be a phased increase across the first quarter. I think that now, will, in my opinion, be the outcome this evening, or whenever they come to that agreement, some kind of phased increase over the course of a few months, with the opportunity to revisit each month, because of course the JMMC meets every month, so there's a constant chance to revise. Anyway, that's a wrap for this holiday week in the UAE, the national day we had yesterday. Wish everybody a safe and economically productive rest of the week, and we'll catch you all on Sunday. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.